Before we dive into how to help House of Coffee analyze their cost, we need to talk about cost classifications. All costs in business can fit into three main cost classifications. Number one, variable cost. Number two, fixed cost. And number three, mixed costs. Depending on a cost classification, they will behave differently with sales levels or sales volume, all within a relevant range. The relevant range is the boundary where assumptions are true. Once we work outside of the relevant range, cost behavior may change. For example, office rent is a fixed cost within a 1 to 2 year relevant range, but can become a variable cost when viewed from a longer time horizon, like 3 to 5 years or more. For this lesson's purposes, we will assume we are working within the relevant range. In CVP analysis, it is important to separate and categorize costs because proper classification will directly affect the CVP formula and therefore the operating profit projections. Let's take a closer look at each classification, beginning with variable costs. Variable costs are expenses directly related to the sale of a product or service. Common variable costs are materials and labor. For a cup of coffee at House of Coffee, this would include coffee beans, cups, and lids, and the cost of labor it takes for an employee's time to make the cup of coffee and deliver it to the customer. Total variable costs vary with sales volume. When sales volume increases, total variable cost increases as well. When sales volume decreases, total variable costs decrease. So let's look at variable costs in relation to House of Coffee. So let's say you walk into House of Coffee's biggest shop in the city. While it's certainly busy, the atmosphere is so cozy. People come here to have conversation with people they truly care about or to work, but not on their everyday job, but on their passion. For some, it might be writing, for others, drawing or creating art in some way. This is the kind of energy that can be felt in this place. It feels safe, and you immediately understand that people aren't only buying coffee here, they're buying this feeling. You're there because you have a meeting with the owner. And before you present the CVP analysis, you'd like to explain the terminology of cost that is at the basis of the analysis. From experience, the owner knows that there are variable costs directly related to making the coffee. But what does that look like exactly? You presented with an example specific to his coffee shop. If the variable cost of 1 cup of coffee at House of Coffee is $3 and 100 cups are sold, the total variable cost is $300. If the sales volume decreases to only 50 cups of coffee being sold, the total variable cost is $150. That's $3 times 50 units. And likewise, if the sales volume increases to 200 cups, then the total variable cost is $600. That's $3 times 200 units. So it's clear that the total variable costs increase and decrease, meaning they vary directly with the sales volume. On the other hand, variable costs per unit are constant regardless of sales levels. So referring to the example, no matter if 50, 100, or 200 cups of coffee are sold, the variable unit cost of 1 cup of coffee always remains $3. So far, so good. Now, let's get to fixed costs. Fixed costs are usually overhead like rent, insurance, depreciation, and supervisor salaries. These costs are unrelated to the volume of sales and are incurred regardless of the amount of products or services that are produced or sold. Total fixed costs are constant regardless of the sales volume within a relevant range. When sales volume increases, total fixed cost stays constant. So let's look at fixed costs in relation to House of Coffee. House of Coffee's records show that the company pays $2,000 per month for rent. So they will pay the same amount for rent no matter whether they sell 500 cups of coffee or 2,000 cups. Rent is still $2,000. This amount remains constant. Now, where it gets interesting is that on the other hand, fixed costs per unit vary with sales volume because the constant amount can be spread across more or less units sold. There is an inverse relationship between fixed cost per unit and sales volume. In other words, when sales volume increases, fixed cost per unit decreases. When sales volume decreases, fixed cost per unit increases. So let's look at it with an example. Let's say 500 cups of coffee are sold. The fixed rent cost is $2,000 and can be allocated across 500 cups of coffee, making the fixed cost per unit $4, $2,000 divided by 500 units. But if 2,000 cups of coffee are sold, now the fixed cost of rent per cup of coffee sold is only $1 per unit, which is $2,000 divided by 2,000 units. So what's the takeaway? It's in House of Coffee's best interest to sell more units of their products or services to cover fixed costs. The more product that is sold, the lower the fixed cost per unit, which would optimize profits over the long term. Now, let's move on to mixed costs. Mixed costs are costs that can be categorized as both fixed and variable. This results from costs that are incurred whether or not any units or product are sold. But when products are sold, an incremental amount of the cost can be assigned to a unit of sales. For the purposes of our CVP analysis, mixed costs must be separated into variable and fixed costs. Hello, certified professional. If you are enjoying this course, get accredited with CPE credits for watching it. Click the link in the show notes or visit cpeflow.com to access the full course ad-free and pass the final assessment quiz to officially earn your NASBA approved CPE credits and certificate of completion. Let's look at mixed costs in relation to House of Coffee to further illustrate this concept. There are currently 3 baristas in the shop, and the owner cares a lot about them. He's been a barista himself before he founded the company. So let's look at the hourly wage as a fixed cost. The hourly wage of a barista is paid to be at work regardless if any sales are made. Additionally, some of their labor cost is their time to clean the store and make sure the bathrooms are stocked with toiletries. Since the barista aren't paid by the amount of coffee they sell or serve, this expense would be categorized as a fixed cost because regardless of how many cups of coffee are sold, the barista will need to show up to work and perform these job duties. Now let's look at an hourly wage as a variable cost. Now you ask the owner to look at the barista currently preparing the 2 large cappuccinos and 1 large Americano, elegantly going from one to the other with an extreme precision. You explain to the owner that the time a barista spends on making a cup of coffee is the one element that's directly related to the unit cost and sales volume. The more cups of coffee are sold, the more time the barista will spend making coffee to sell. This will be categorized as a variable cost. Now that the cost terminology is clear, in your next meeting, you will present the CVP analysis of House of Coffee's contribution margin, meaning which of their products is the most profitable.